everybody, and welcome back to No Strings, Just Candor. And this would be our episode 5. And to celebrate this, we have my small little boy, Zeke. And this wasn't a planned guest appearance, but he's terrified of rain and thunder, so he will be joining us for our conversation today. And if you're lucky, you might see the smaller one pop in and out from time to time. Zeke also is the one who you hear a lot of times in the background of my videos because he wants to say hi. So today he decided to make an appearance. So, yeah. If this is the first time for you tuning in, then welcome. No Strings, Just Candor is a podcast that I decided to start, and I wanted it to be about a few things that I'm very passionate about. So, for example, I'm passionate about HR. HR has been my career for some time, and I think I see HR in a very different way than a lot of either traditional HR individuals look at it or just in a different way that your normal corporate HR CEO might not look at HR. So I also talk about mental health. I'm huge on mental health. I'm a huge advocate. It's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So it is something that I always advocate for. So we're going to definitely be talking about mental health, and then finally just helping people. One of the main things that I knew that I always wanted to do, I didn't know how or through what channel, but I always knew that I wanted to help people. And I don't want to help them in a sense of, oh, I pity you or I feel bad for you, so I'm going to give you all of this advice. Like, I want to be able to be a representation of, yes, you can. Yes, you can continue to move forward. I also want to be able to say that representation matters in this podcast. So I want others, I don't care how old you are, I don't care what gender you are, I don't care what background you have or any of that. I want you to be able to look at me, and if anything at all that I say or the way that I act or the way that I am resonates with you, I want that to be something that you're just saying, okay, if she can do it, so can I. If somebody like her can do it, so can I. So thank you so much for joining me. If it is your first time, welcome. If it is you returning, then I am so excited. We keep going up on subscribers, which is incredibly humbling. I'm so grateful for all of you that continuously try to show up and listen to my podcast and most recently my new endeavors into TikTok. So yeah, welcome. Welcome to No Strings to Scandor. Now, today's conversation, as in regular nature of my podcast, was not something that I was planning on speaking of. We can definitely go down a million rabbit holes into very different things that I've experienced throughout my career or ways that I have coached my executives. I'm hopefully going to make this short. Don't hold me to it because I don't know. What comes out of my mouth is a surprise for both you and I. So what I wanted to do is tell you a little bit of a story that was just brought to my attention today. And I kind of want to build from there. Now, I do want to preface this with saying this is not an argumentative type of stance. I'm not doing this to call anybody out or to single anybody out. I am just talking about this because it is the reality of things. And that's what I promised from the very beginning, which was no strings, just candor. And the story that came to my attention today was somebody that's very close to me called me and said, Odette, this just happened. This happened at work. And I kind of want to just vent about it and talk about it and everything. And I said, all right, let's hear it. So they're basically telling me that they had sent, so it's a she. So she was telling me that she sent out an email, and she sent out an email during a later time where a phone call wouldn't have been probably appropriate, or a text message or any of that. So she sent an email, and the email was very direct, very matter of fact. And it just basically said, I'm noticing these gaps in your performance, or noticing these gaps in what we're expecting from you. I need you to do X, Y, and Z. Let's get together at a different time so we can discuss this. And as she's telling me this, I do hear her voice crack a little bit, and it breaks my heart. And it breaks my heart because me picturing someone like her getting yelled at is incredibly hard. So I kind of jumped the gun here and it's getting yelled at. So it was a little bit of a spoiler, but she tells me that the next day she's at the place of work, and this guy, this person that works for her, mind you, she is at a higher title, but the person that works for her walks into their place of work and just goes off on her, starts yelling at her, starts just saying all these different things. Mind you, they're in a public place. There is different people that can hear them. There are different employees that can hear them. So they're in a very public place. And this man is going off on her. And I asked her, I said, what did you do? And she said, well, I just stood there and I froze. And it hit me so hard because I actually had been in a position before where a leader that I respected a lot did that in the middle of a conversation while I was in front of a lot of other important employees and directors and all of that. And I felt awful. And I honestly did the same. I stopped and I froze, and then I cried about it for about 3 days. But going back to the story, and I asked her, I said, what did you do? Let's go back and read me your email. As I suspected, her email was very matter of fact. Her email was just very, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what I'm noticing, this is how we're going to move forward. There was nothing wrong with the way that that email was drafted. Now, like I said, we can definitely go into a million of rabbit holes when it comes to communications. I can talk to you about how to maybe leverage the way that you communicate with your employees and how to increase the effectiveness of it. I can definitely go into all of that, but that's not why we're here today. We're here today is to focus on the story because the story was something that really impacted me. And so I go over this email and I tell her, I was like, there's nothing wrong with this email. You did everything that you needed to do. You weren't rude. You anything. I don't understand. And then it dawned on me. She is a woman. She is a woman who bypassed exclamation points, who bypassed happy faces, who bypassed emojis, who bypassed any of that and just said, matter of fact, this is what I want from you. This is what I need from you. And that's it. So my thought here is, if it would have been a male supervisor, would that employee had the same reaction? Would that employee had the same emotional reaction that he had? And I want to bet, I don't want to assume, but there is something in me that tells me no, it wouldn't have happened. Because as women, we're taught to be softer. We're taught to be nicer. We're taught to make sure that your emails end with an exclamation point or with a happy face, or make sure that you're being, that you're masking in a certain way so that you could come off in an effective way. And it's exhausting. Everyone that's listening, it's exhausting. If you're a woman out there, you understand me. It's exhausting to continuously have to soften yourself to be able to be effective and for someone not to take your point of view as aggressive or emotional or out there or any of that. So it's incredibly hard for me to hear that these things are happening, because not only has it happened to me, but it continues to happen. And what I want to say is, if you're a woman out there, please don't feel the pressure for niceties. Don't feel the pressure to put that happy face. Don't feel the pressure to do your pleases and thank yous. Don't feel the pressure to do any of that. You don't have to. If you are a work setting, I'm not asking you and I'm not telling you to be a hard ass. I'm not telling you, be mean to your employees or all of that. But I am telling you, you don't have to be extra for you to be effective. Don't give into that pressure, because I even catch myself sometimes going over emails and being like, ooh, well, did I sound a little too harsh on this email? And I need to stop doing that. And I think we all as women need to stop doing that, because I think that our communication is good enough. And I think that everything that we say and we speak is just as valid as our male counterparts. Now, here's the thing. I am also asking you to not lose that I don't want to say emotional, but yes, almost emotional side of you. I was talking to my best friend and I'm kind of venting to her, and she brought up such a beautiful point where she said, yeah, but so what if we are emotional? So what if we're more passionate? So what? It helps us look at our business is different. It helps us look at different scenarios in a different ways. It helps us approach things with empathy, with sympathy. And it's true, right? I'm asking you not to be exactly like a male counterpart. What I'm really asking you to is be you. If the you is softer and you like to put exclamation points and you like to put emojis, by all means do it. I encourage you to do it. But don't feel the need to do it just because you feel like you're going to be taken a different way. So my advice to this person who's telling me that she went through all of this was, I would have stopped it. The moment he would have come towards me and started yelling, I would have stopped him. And I would have said, I'm going to need you to stop. You are obviously in no emotional state to be speaking with me right now. And I think that this is a very emotion driven conversation that I feel is not going to serve us any good. So I'm going to walk away, and we can later on come back to this, sit down, and be able to talk about what it was about my email that bothered you, what it was about my communication that bothered you. How can we avoid this happening again? We could have had a different conversation. But the fact that you came in and you thought that it was okay to yell at me, to make, a spectacle out of me in front of so many people, it's unacceptable. So I told her she should have walked away after she told him all of that, and then maybe circled back. And if they were still reacting a certain way, then I would have said, you know what? Let's have a third party be present, because there's obviously a huge disconnect between you and I'm not doing it. So it's funny how a lot of men tell us that we're so emotional and we're emotional driven, but the moment that their ego is hurt just a little bit, they become so powerfully emotional and sometimes so damaging that they don't realize it. That should not have happened. We are not children. We do not get reprimanded at work. We don't get yelled at work. And I need you to hear me, because I feel that I have spoken to other people who are just like, oh yeah, well, like that happened. No. So my advice to her was walk away and say, I need there to be a boundary. Set your boundaries. And I need it to be a respectful boundary. I need you to respect me. I don't care what gender, ethnicity, background, sexual orientation. I don't care. There needs to be a foundation of respect. And the moment that that foundation of respect is crossed into a negative way, I will remove myself from the situation. There's not going to be an if, there's not going to be a but, there's not going to be a but. No, absolutely not. I will remove myself from the situation, and I encourage all of you to remove yourself from the situation. If you remain in a place where you're constantly being talked down to, if you remain in a place where you're constantly being told no and made feeling like you're less than yourself or any of that, please remove yourself from that situation, because you're unknowingly letting somebody else take your psychological safety away. We're grown-ups, and calling people's names and people disrespecting us is unacceptable. I don't care where you are or what level you are. It's just not. So I want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate here, because I also want to kind of bring it back to that male employee. Granted, he could have had a bad day. He could have just been reprimanded at work, and then he got this email and he took this email a certain way, and he then just blew up, right? Two, maybe he just didn't read the email correctly. Maybe he just thought that she was disrespecting him in some type of way by not saying please and thank you and everything, which not a great reason, right? It still remains That sucks. Don't do it. But let's say that would have been it. Then we need a little bit of coaching. Then we need a little bit of more of a, you cannot speak to other people like that. Third, if this person is willing to talk like this and to create this scene towards a supervisor, towards someone at a much higher level, if they're willing to do this, how are they talking to their employees? How are they talking to their coworkers? And this is where I tap in and I start bringing leaders accountable, which brings me back to my previous conversation, which is you need to hold your leaders accountable. So whatever your culture is, maybe you have a verbal communication only culture where you only give feedback verbally and there's nothing written. HR nightmare, makes me cringe, but there's some cultures out there that are like that. Fine. Let's say it's a culture where it is everything's written down or everything. Whatever the culture is, respect needs to be settled, and we need to hold these leaders accountable into how they're treating their team members and coworkers. If I, that person's supervisor, I will start looking into the turnover within his department. I will start looking at the fact how many people have issues with him. Is this a normal for him? If it's not normal for him, we can actually have that conversation. We can sit him down. We can say, this cannot happen again. You cannot disrespect someone in this way. And then we can go from there in coaching. But if this is a norm for them, you as their leader, if you are their leader or whoever it is, needs to hold him accountable and either needs to have an extreme conversation with this person or this person is extremely toxic and needs to be let go. If this is a constant thing that happens and it's written down and it's documented and you keep letting it happen, you are contributing to a toxic culture. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip that I used to do. When I first started my career, I would really read into a lot of emails. I was like, you know, your normal, if, oh my God, if they say you have 5 minutes, I'm going to freak out. So my best friend actually used this as an example. And she said, if my mom wrote to me K to a text message, fine. Like if my mom wrote to me K in text message, then I'd just be like, okay, cool. That means okay. Now, if my girlfriend, if Allie decides to K me, that is not, no. We all know how it feels like to be K'd. So that would be a big no-no. And can't believe I just said no-no, but I did. If that happens, then it's different because it's a different generation. And again, that's another conversation. We can go towards generations and communications, but back to the tip. The tip is when I started and I would read in a lot into emails from my CEOs or my supervisors or any of those, I would find myself reading too much into them. I would just be like, oh my God, are they mad at me? Are they upset? Did I do something wrong? And I find myself in this like vicious cycle of just worrying and worrying and worrying. And what I realized was that I was not doing my job. I was instead spending my time worrying about what this person was talking about or how they were meaning it or how they were trying to communicate it and whether they were mad at me or not. And so I started doing something that has helped me until this day. I still use, and I tell a lot of my mentees and a lot of my executive coaches to do the same way if they struggle with trying to separate their feelings with reading a message and kind of just going over it too much and ruminating over it too much. What you can do is you can have a notepad, or if you're a computer person, fine. I'm a paper person. And I would put urgency, what, when, why, and then I would have those questions. And then when I would get an email from that executive that I knew was going to throw me off and be like, oh God, I dreaded the CEO's emails because I was so scared of them. And what I ended up doing was just every single time I would get an email, I would separate my feelings from it. And I would just then scan the email and I would say, what is the urgency behind this? If they're saying we need this by tomorrow, what is the timeline? Then I would write down, okay, the timeline is they need this by the end of the day. Therefore, urgency is high. What is it that they need? And then I would put what they needed. why they needed it. And I would put all of this when they needed it. Granted, every email did not have all of that information, but what it did have was the urgency and what it is that they wanted. Those were like my two main things that I needed to do. Once I started writing those down and forgetting about how it was written, what punctuation was used, whether an emoji was used or not, I became so much more effective at my job because I no longer was worried about it. And it kind of dawned on me. And I said, I'm a grown up, right? Sometimes I'm a grown up. If they had an issue with me and they were upset at me and they're my leader, that is up to them to tell me. So until they tell me that I'm doing something wrong, or until they tell me that they're not liking the way that I am performing, I'm not taking it personal. I'm just going to keep going. So if you want to take this tip, I suggest you do it and maybe get back to me on how it works. If it works for you, or if you tried something new, I would love to hear from you. Now, can you do that with a Slack message of, okay? Or can you do that with a Slack message of, hey, can you talk for a minute? And then that's it. No, you can't. What you can do is you can talk to your supervisor. What you can do is talk to your coworker and say, hey, when you send me the word just K, for some reason, my mind immediately goes into, oh no, there's something wrong. Or they're mad at me. And when I get the, hey, do you have a minute? I immediately go into, oh, they're going to fire me. Or, oh my God, they're going to yell at me. So have that communication with your coworkers. Again, I don't know how many times I have to say it. We're all adults. We can all have conversations with one another. And there doesn't have to be any animosity behind it. We can be respectful. We can have healthy conflict. We can have a conversation. You can tell someone and say, hey, when you send me that message, it makes me freak out. So maybe like next time, send it differently. Or, hey, can you do this differently? If the person's an asshole, they're going to continue to do it. And there's like not much that we can do about that. But at least you're speaking up for yourself. So to wrap it all up, key points. Women, don't feel the need to be different than you are. Don't feel the need to be softer. Don't feel the need to be tougher. Don't feel the need to be anyone but yourself to be effective. Make sure that you are being 100% authentically yourself. Because if you're not, I can almost guarantee that you are in a fast lane to burnout. Because masking and acting like somebody that you're not is incredibly exhausting. 2, if somebody approaches you from work or maybe your personal life and they are immediately crossing a boundary, stop them and set the boundary. Stop them and say, I cannot talk to you while you're speaking to me like this. It is unacceptable. I don't react well to it. So before I get caught up in it, I'm going to walk away, and maybe we can, and I hate that I'm saying this, and maybe we can circle back at a later time when all emotions have simmered down, and we can have this conversation as two grown-up professionals. And then third is there are tools and resources. If you really think that it is you just overthinking emails, if you constantly just get an email and then you ask your boss, oh my God, are you mad at me? And they're responding and they're like, no, like that, I'm not mad at you. Then maybe you are reading a little bit too much into emails or Slacks or whatever it is. Write it down. Write down the urgency, the what, the when, the where, the why, whatever it is that it needs you to just focus on the message, do that. Okay. And then fourth of all is, I don't know what fourth of all is. Fourth of all is just me being highly upset that this is happening to a lot of people. And what's even more upsetting is that some people think that this is normal and some people think that this is okay. It's not. It really isn't. And again, we can have many different paths down this conversation that I may be able to do in other episodes. But the truth of the matter is that we all need to respect each other. You don't need to yell at me to give me feedback. If I did something that offended you, I expect you to come to me and tell me this and have a conversation, and we can change and we can adjust the way that I talk to you or the channels that we use to talk to one another. And if for some reason you happen to be one of those who say, and I can't say men, or I can't say men, and I can't, because women, this is a conversation for next week. Women, we're going to talk about women, and we're going to talk about women in leadership, and we're going to talk about women in leadership positions and competition and all of that, but you'll stay tuned for that. Men or women, if you feel you have the right to talk to somebody like that, check yourself. They're not your children. And I will be the first one, as your executive coach, as your HR person, as your chief people person, whatever it is, if I am involved in your life and you feel the need and you think that it is okay to talk down to others and berate them and all of that, there's no other way to put it, but you fucking suck, because you have no idea how much this can impact a person mentally. So let's reel it all back in. I don't care if you're a CEO. I don't care if you are a director, a VP, anything. I don't care. What I do care about is if there is a line of respect and are there boundaries set. If you don't like the way that I perform, I expect feedback. And if feedback doesn't work, then go ahead and fire me. But do not disrespect me. And if you don't get it together and understand that the respect that you give others is monumental to how you are seen, then there's not much that I can do for you. Actually, there is. Let's work on your emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, huge skill. I love teaching it. I love talking to people about it. But you're going to have this conversation with me. So there are ways to mediate all of this. But if there is only one thing that you take from this, is do not let anybody disrespect you. You do not deserve that. Ever. Okay? So next week, I'm going to have a guest speaker, and it's going to be my first guest. So I'm super excited for her to be here. And she has been a huge impact in my career. And I'm going to have to figure out the microphone situation, because I don't know how it works to have two microphones. But if you see two microphones, that means that I figured it out or Allie figured it out, and that would be great. But just as a reminder, these podcasts, they drop every Thursday and usually around 10 a.m. Again, maybe the timelines don't hold me too much on it, but every Thursday, I promise you that you will have a podcast from No Strings, Just Candor. And we will be talking, like I said, HR, mental health, helping people, empowering them, uplifting them, whatever it is. I want to be here and I want to be a voice for you. So I hope to see you next week. And I hope to see you around on my TikTok. You're going to get this version of me on YouTube. I might be a little bit more unhinged on TikTok, because it is just a spur of the moment type of thing that no one told me was that hard to do. But yeah, I can't wait to see you guys next week and continue on this journey. And that's it. I have nothing else to say. So goodbye, everybody.